Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next SNARL seminar. Really nice to see you all there, and nice to have a lovely snowy day here in Mammoth. For those of you in town, we're really happy to see a little bit more snow hitting before the summer comes. It's my pleasure today to introduce, not only is Haley a speaker in our seminar series, but she's actually one of our graduate student award recipients this year. And as you can probably tell from the title of her talk tonight, she's going to be talking about something a little bit different than our usual, talking about biology or geology or bugs or frogs or snow. Haley's actually, her subject matter is humans, which makes it that much more interesting to some of us. So it's really going to be great to have Haley. She'll be here next week in person, and she'll be talking about the workshop that she'll be presenting. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our series speaker tonight. Her name is Haley Fitzpatrick. She is a holistic designer, passionate about crafting better relationships with nature. She works across architecture, landscape, systemic design, and sustainability science. She was trained as an architect, working in the United States, and recently at Renzo Piano Building Workshop in Genova. Currently, Haley is a PhD student and teacher at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design, and a design associate at the MonViso Institute, which is a real-world laboratory for sustainability transitions, regenerative design, and new alpine living. So tonight, Haley's going to be talking about a project that some of you are already familiar with a little bit. Haley's been here to SNARL once before leading a workshop. She's met many of you in the Mammoth Voices group that are out there and gotten a lot of good input from you. And we're going to try something a little different at the end of this seminar tonight. Haley's got some interactive components. And so we're going to try out a feature called the whiteboard, which she'll do at the end. But I would just like to mention, if you have questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And so you can type questions into there. You can raise your hand, and you can also type things into the chat too. And so Haley's left plenty of time at the end of her talk for some interaction with all of you out there. And so Haley, thank you for being our presenter tonight, and I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol, for the introduction and also this great opportunity to present my PhD project with everyone here during this SNARL seminar series. And I'm going to just share my screen right now. All right, is the screen visible and everyone can see this?
Yep, that looks great.
Great. And just for reference, I'm currently in my second year of my PhD program, which is a 4-year program in total. So I'm about halfway through and getting a lot of insight, but still have a lot of things left unanswered. So this evening, I'm going to speak about how my project is exploring pathways to co-create more resilient and regenerative mountain communities through a comparative analysis between 3 global living examples, as I'm calling them here, as represented in this map. So we have Ostana, Italy in the lower right-hand corner. We have Hemsedal, Norway, which is in the upper right-hand corner, and the Eastern Sierra as a region as a whole, but also zooming in more specifically into the towns of MammothLakes and Bishop. And as Carol mentioned, this talk acts as a teaser for the in-person workshop that I'll be hosting at the Page Center in SNARL next week on Wednesday, the 18th. So I'll be sharing details about that later on. So this is a stark image that probably many of you are familiar with, but as you probably know, mountain places are really barometers of climate change effects. And You're probably well aware of the severity and really live through the severity of these high intensity fires, drought, and the rapidly diminishing snowpack that is affecting this region, and also feeling the need to really take action towards this. Yet the climate crisis is just one of many interconnected challenges in mountain communities. And we can look at this through four key themes. Firstly, mountain communities have had a history of single sector industries like mining or agricultural, which is now starting to manifest in tourism. And these single sector industries have limited the socioeconomic resilience of mountain communities. Secondly and thirdly, two other challenges are the physical and social isolation that has resulted in both a lack of infrastructure and public services, and also increased a greater homogeneity within the populations of the people living in mountain communities. So in general, there's a kind of lack of diversity within social groups and can also decrease resilience. And then lastly, this concept of shifting populations. So the historical and current population shifts have resulted in both extreme depopulation that we see in mountain communities, as well as an extreme repopulation. So that could either be a result of an aging demographic, or what we're seeing now across the world is this COVID-19 sort of remote work exodus from urban areas towards rural places. But at the same time, on a positive note, mountain places are very resilient by nature, and to live and thrive in extreme environments requires immense social and technological adaptability. But in a world that we are living in today that is more connected than ever, we really need a different approach in how we engage with complexity and uncertainty and transitioning towards a more sustainable society. So this is what I'm exploring in my PhD project. How can we better broaden awareness as well as participation in complex sustainability transformations in mountain communities through a holistic process, practice, and methodology called systemic design? So you might be wondering, I've never heard this term, what is systemic design? Well, it all starts with systems thinking. So I like to describe systems thinking through the metaphor of an old stone ruin. I spent a lot of time in Italy and have seen a lot of these old stone Italian ruins in the Alps all around the landscape. They're old mountain huts or farms, and it's just kind of a common object, everyday object that nobody really pays attention to. But at the same time, if you start to think about the ruin from different angles, different perspectives, scales, points in time, who lived there, what kind of species have lived there now and in the past, and how this ruin sort of represents a culture and what that means for the future. This is what it means to think in systems. So if you act somewhere within one of these different aspects, there's always an effect somewhere else. So systemic design is really approaching design with a systems thinking perspective, which helps us better understand and cope with complexity to make more effective, inclusive, and holistic decisions that don't just solve the short-term problems, but really are targeting the long-term ones as well. So there's an emerging research within systemic design on what kinds of knowledge from policy to science, management, other disciplines and praxis could be useful in bringing together into a kind of portfolio of methods. So this is what I'm exploring in my own work and in this project. How does the combination of different qualitative and quantitative methods work together to broaden that awareness and participation in complex sustainability transformations? So I'm exploring right now some specific things like co-design workshops, social network analysis, engaging in student courses, landscape spatial analysis, and this is an ongoing and evolving portfolio as well for me. And I'm testing these different systemic design methods across these 3 global mountain communities to compare and contrast how different mountain places are approaching the transition towards a more resilient and regenerative future and what we can learn from each. So once again, we have Ostana, Italy, Hemsedal, Norway, and the Eastern Sierra. So I'll first give you a brief background on the different communities and then talk about specific examples of resilience pathways that can inspire some new thinking in the Eastern Sierra as well. So Ostana, Italy is deeply rooted in a specific Occitan culture within broader Italian culture. And this is located in the Po Valley in the Italian Piedmont part of the Northern Alps. And this sleepy town of about 30 full-time residents is not what it seems maybe in this image here, and described by these quotes that from one of the workshops that I recently conducted, there are some challenges related to social connectivity, tourism, and livability. So Ostana didn't always used to have these challenges. In fact, the town had very different challenges just 50 years ago. And one way to understand how and when the community changes over time is through this adaptive waves model of resilience. So this model is based on decades of different research on resilience, and we can measure how resilient a system or community is based on where and how the community navigates these 4 different stages. So like any process in nature, there are periods of growth where there are resources available for development, starting on the left-hand corner of the wave. Phases of conservation when growth is reaching a limit, and then falling into a release cycle when a crisis hits, for example, COVID-19, and survival mode kicks in. And then comes the interesting reorganization phase of a system, where we are most adaptive and where we can reimagine and test new strategies in order to be able to grow again. So if we map the history of Ostana through this adaptive wave model, very broadly at a macro level, Ostana's relied on agriculture for most of the town's existence. And then with new technologies like electricity, that had increased the population. However, a post-World War II urban development in the nearby city of Turin led to a rural exodus. And in the 1980s, Ostana was on the brink of collapse with only 5 inhabitants. And then a small group of innovators in the early 1990s, early 2000s, started to understand that there was a future for Ostana. And they started reviving the old Occitan architecture and trying to transition the broken economy into something with tourism involved. So while this is a positive for Ostana, there are also different challenges popping up because of this. So such as the rapid COVID-19 growth from second homeowners wanting to buy up the old ruins, et cetera. So the challenges that Ostana is facing now is both a result of their history as well as what they hope to see in the future. But it's really important to be able to differentiate what are the sort of visible challenges that we see on the surface. So as identified here above the dashed line in this graphic, and the invisible challenges, or you could think of it as the symptoms versus the root causes. So for example, if we choose the second column here, the high housing prices that are very visible right now in the community, these are a result of underlying patterns and structures like restoring old ruins that are incentivized from the government. And that is then coming from a deeper mindset from urban people that there's this need to return to nature somehow. So the more we can identify the root causes of these deeper mindsets behind what's driving the visible challenges, the more transformative impact we have on positive change, even if it's more difficult to target those deeper mindsets. So now I'll give you an example of an initiative that is responding to some of these complex interconnected challenges in Ostana, the MonViso Institute, where I also work. So the MonViso Institute is a real-world laboratory for sustainability transitions, education, and entrepreneurship. It's both a physical campus in Ostana, conducting workshops, experiments, outreach events, and retreats, but it's also connected to a broader global network of universities, other institutions, and change makers around the world. And these are just some examples here of what the MonViso Institute is engaged in. And I won't go into too much detail here, and we'll expand upon this in the workshop, but I did want to also point out how the campus is really this sort of living example of resilient systems, and in which all of the buildings, infrastructure, and landscape design are a continuous experiment in how to reduce waste, increase effectiveness, and optimize resources, such as recycled water systems, renewable energy strategies, engaging local people in the construction process, providing habitat for other species. So really a systemic design approach here. But I wanted to zoom in more specifically into a particular resilience strategy that the MonViso Institute has been working on for quite some time, which is exploring hemp as a bioregional economy. So hemp used to be quite popularly grown in this area in Ostana, but then with some time it was banned and forgotten, but now there's this emphasis on revitalizing this material, not only in Ostana, but also Switzerland, other parts of Europe as well. And through a systemic design approach, the MonViso Institute is really exploring how hemp can engage in different systems and sectors of the economy to increase the resilience of the community of Ostana. So for example, if we start out here with this image with the pink poster that says hemp, it began with a lot of research and development with partners all around the world, then leading to student groups, like a planting session with them, engaging with regional universities, a harvesting party with locals, which led to a sort of regional processing with a family-run business, engaging with local agencies to transfer the hemp shives into a raw product that could be used to create fibers. And this was all communicated at a community outreach event with technical demonstrations of the real products. So using hemp to make wooden skis, or hemp for building materials, especially insulation. So all of these different stages of this process of engaging with a singular element like a plant really contribute to a more diversified economy and help pinpoint some of these challenges in the lower left-hand corner that I spoke about earlier. So switching gears, we're going north to Norway. I would like to draw your attention to the second case study, which is Hemsedal. And Hemsedal is situated along a major valley that connects through the mountains, the biggest city of Western Norway, which is Bergen, and then the capital of the south, which is Oslo, which is also the capital of the entire country. And Hemsedal is a much larger community than Ostana. There's about 2,000 people there full time. But during the ski tourism season, there can be over 30,000 people in one weekend. So it's an enormous transition between population. And this singular ski tourism identity is starting to really challenge the services and also the sort of social resilience of the community itself. So if we jump back to this adaptive wave model that you saw for Ostana, if we apply this also for Hemsedal, which also started out as an agricultural economy, it's interesting to see how their trajectory has also changed over time. So Hemsedal's poor soil quality led them to actually reorganize very early on in the 1800s towards a hospitality town. So accommodating travelers on the newly constructed Bergen Railway. And then that all led towards a great success in the ski tourism industry. And now the town is known all around Scandinavia and most of Northern Europe as the best ski resort for after ski parties. So this is an international destination for sure. But there are also currently a lot of major divisions popping up between local business owners, farmers, and others who are feeling a sort of pressure for this tourist first mentality. So once again, we can better understand these challenges by breaking down the symptoms versus the root causes. For example, the town center of Hemsedal, the third challenge here, the third column, is very run down, not a pleasant place to be in. And this is the result of continuous flooding of the river, the highway that runs right through the town, the higher elevated ski area, getting all the funding for development. So all of this is stemming from the fact that the river has been seen in the past 10, 15 years as a huge problem, but ignoring the fact that it could actually be a really interesting potential solution for revitalizing the town. So if we look at the deeper mindset, it could be, something about whether we can try to control nature or try to design with nature. So now I'll give you an example of a resilience strategy that is responding to these complex interconnected challenges in Hemsedal. And this is engaging students as change makers. So this image here shows the master's students systemic design course that I'm teaching. This was last fall. And they're engaging in a visual dialogue mapping session with the mayor of Hemsedal, Paul Ruby. And this was on future wishes for the community. And we talked a lot about the river in this session, actually. And this is part of a bigger initiative with my university, atAHO, which is Oslo School of Architecture and Design, and the PhD project as a whole to try to establish a long-term partnership with the university in Hemsedal. So each semester for the past 2 years, we have brought systemic design students up to Hemsedal and are working together with stakeholders, business owners, the municipality to try to better understand the complex challenges as well as pathways towards resilient futures. So I won't go into detail here, but I just wanted to show this map as the kind of depth and extent of the relationships with the community and how this grows over time. And this is a really organic process, actually, that takes a lot of time and coordination, which usually kind of inhibits these partnerships from happening most of the time. So it's become clear as an emphasis that is really lacking in the current discussion on sustainability transformations are these sort of in-between roles, these coordinating figures that can move in between different disciplines, different institutions, municipalities, and really try to connect these different things together. So the figure of the coordinator and communities to weave between is really becoming an important focus. And then how do we specifically with our students engage with the community? And this starts with the students as well as us teachers immersing ourselves into the complexity of Hemsedal. So the students are seen as change makers and they embody this role because they can question the status quo and initiate new ideas, but in a low threshold way. People are really happy to talk to students. They're not out to make a profit, they don't have an agenda, and they're really eager to learn. So when we are back in Oslo at the university, the students download all the information that they gathered, talking to people, observing, and they make these massive gigamaps. These are messy maps that connect different systems together, and they start to identify what are the current challenges and desired futures, pathways, and where the sort of intervention points could happen for those strategies. And then they have recently made these synthesis maps, which is distilling this complex information of those messy maps you just saw before into something that can be a communication tool. So these could be thought-provoking, inspirational posters that try to nudge new ways of thinking. So it's not necessarily suggesting a solution in full detail, but it's really trying to open up a new mentality and thinking differently. So these recent maps respond to 5 different challenges in Hemsedal by suggesting different interconnected strategies. So for example, the river, one in the middle here, one student group looked at designing a multifaceted approach to really celebrate the river and also connect some of the forgotten older neighborhoods of Hemsedal together. So weaving in these different components. So here we are, last but certainly not least, in the Eastern Sierra, the third case study of this project. So as you can maybe see, in contrast to Ostana and Hemsedal, where I'm more deeply rooted in organizations, I basically started from scratch with the Eastern Sierra, but I knew about this incredibly beautiful, interesting, complex, dynamic region from my supervisor, Tobias, and his peers, and one of which being Carol. So this sort of manifested in this really interesting organic process of engaging with people here. And it took me a long time to travel here actually from Europe during the COVID pandemic. And my first visit was in January 2020. And I had a small workshop and some walk and talk interviews and also the desk research, of course, but just trying to gather some first impressions of this area from different perspectives. So I started connecting with different organizations, institutions, initiatives, tribes, and municipalities within the region to try to understand how the different parts of the communities are approaching resilience. And all of these folks who I've been speaking to have been super generous with their time, and I really appreciate that. So just a shout out to any of those folks who I've already spoken to who are here. And really sharing with me their stories. And there's just some really amazing, inspiring stories out there that should really be celebrated. And so I hope that this project can also do that in some way. And I know the locals in the audience know the history of the Eastern Sierra in much more detail than I do. But from my initial research and conversations with folks, I started to map out some of the key moments in history just as just a basic understanding of how we could maybe imagine this region through the adaptive waves model. So what I'm gathering from a lot of people is that the region is facing some truly unprecedented challenges like climate change effects and over-tourism. Yet at the same time, there seems to be quite a bit of positive action-oriented responses to these effects with sustainable recreation initiatives, fire resilience projects, et cetera, from different angles. So this is really interesting to see as well. And I'm also starting to map out some of these visible and invisible challenges, as you saw in Hemsedal and Ostana. And attempted to weave them together here as a very starting point for discussion. So we will be definitely going into this in more detail in the workshop. So this is just a kind of teaser of maybe putting together what could be some underlying patterns and structures that maybe contribute towards some of these visible challenges that we see on a day-to-day, like the mass tourism effects of maybe disrespectful camping activities or heavy truck traffic that's maybe causing some pollution and respiratory health concerns, this sort of general maybe lack of interaction between different groups, which was something that was coming up a lot in my conversations with folks. So these are just some things here, but what is really important is to try to have as many voices represented as possible to understand holistically which challenges are interconnected and how. So really looking forward to trying to dig in deeper with this with you all. So just to close, I'd like to briefly share some interesting ideas for building synergies across different socioeconomic and socio-ecological systems in the Eastern Sierra that came up in the last workshop I had back in January. So we were brainstorming just very casually, but some interesting ideas came out about how potentially the Benton landfill could be transformed into maybe a renewable energy center, a cooperative, or what it would take to fully revitalize traditional Paiute irrigation systems at a regional scale, or creating a regional business resource center that also has a virtual platform component that could better connect job opportunities that aren't traditionally advertised in how we usually do so. And then, yeah, maybe like a artisanal workshop model where both tourists could pay a fee and then locals could learn for free about woodworking or traditional crafts. So trying to build a greater solidarity between different social groups, for example. So these are all just hypotheticals, but just wanted to plant some seeds here and share what we discussed in the previous workshop. So I'm going to finish here, as I know this is a lot of information to take in. And what I was thinking and what Carol mentioned previously is that we could do a very short interactive activity, because I'd really like to hear from you all about what you think these sort of challenges and opportunities in the Eastern Sierra could be, and just basically providing some reactions to these 4 questions. And then afterwards, we can open the floor for some more general Q&A. So I think what we will do is open up the whiteboard setting. Just stop sharing here. So this is a new system that I've never used before, so just please bear with me. But I think what we can do is just copy paste the text from the questions. So that it's easier to respond to. And I think what we can basically do is just use the text tool. So I guess maybe a question from you, Carol, is can the audience see the whiteboard screen?
I think they can see it, and I'm just figuring out how they can bring up the text tool to type on it.
Okay, great. And if this doesn't work out, we can just have you all respond in the chat with your answers. So this can be question number. So this is part one, part 2, visible, invisible. Then we have question number 2. And if any of these questions you're feeling really stuck or don't know how to answer, there's no pressure at all. It's just a way to try and open up the floor to you all to give your input. All right, so I guess we could just try and start and see if anyone is able to throw in a quick comment here or response to any of these questions using the text tool.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they can see the text tool. And if not, they can at least see those questions.
They can see the questions.
And
okay.
then type things into the chat if they can't type on the in the whiteboard. I'm trying to figure out if they can do that.
I'll just number these here so it's easier if you want to respond in the chat instead of the whiteboard. You can just include the number in front of your answer so it's easier to follow. All right, we got a first one, drought. That's a big one. So I think what maybe I can do is copy these in since I have control. We can do it that way. I'm sure everyone has a lot of ideas here. Okay, we got unhoused camps. Any invisible reasons or mindsets that you could think of that maybe would be contributing to these visible challenges for those who responded in the chat? Oh, great. Nice, okay. So we'll put these here as invisible. What about some knowledge experiences that you would be really proud to share to other mountain communities, whether it's a success story or as a sort of, sharing a story of failure as a what not to do situation? There we go. We know what it's like to fight extractive industries. Yes. Hope I'm capturing everybody here. Price of housing driven up by second homeowners. Yep. Good one too. Yeah, so this point about having a more diversified tourism for recreational activities, it's not just skiing. Yeah, this is something that Hemsedal is really trying to move forward towards with mountain biking and climbing, but they're in a little bit of a standstill on this. So I think it could definitely be a great success to share with them. Oh, that is a wonderful relationship to the Eastern Sierra here. I think a lot of, that's where a lot of passion comes from. So that's great. This is great. Yeah, so if anyone else wants to chime in, also this last point here, what do you hope to see in the future for the Eastern Sierra? You know, if there's any kind of concrete aspects, I'd love to have a XYZ nearby, or more philosophical, like this answer here. Education and sharing this love and respect for the region. All right, a lot of things coming in here. Hope to capture everything. So we got sustainability as something for the future. All right, you guys are fast now. So let's see. Other stewards, yes, definitely. Great point about how our elected and appointed officials could be more representative of the population. That's also a big issue in Hemsedal, also with the language barrier of Norwegian and English, since there's a huge population of seasonal workers who are non-Norwegian. And it's really difficult to communicate and engage because all of the communication from the municipality is in Norwegian. So that's a great point here. Great. This looks like a pretty interesting and great contributions here. So I guess if there's any more thoughts anyone would like to share, we can just maybe wrap up this activity here and then have the floor open for any general Q&A, or also keep working on this if anyone has any ideas that pop into their mind.
And I could just let everyone know, if you have questions for Haley, you can type them in the Q&A or in the chat, or you can just raise hand. There's a button on the bottom of the Zoom that says raise hand, and we can let you speak your question if you prefer to just do that verbally.
I think we have a raised hand. Mickey.
Hey, Mickey, you can go ahead and talk.
Hey, I feel, especially since COVID, that there's a general malaise. I mean, people are just burnt out. So there's a lot of passion when, you talk about housing and drought and sustainability, but people don't have really the time or the effort or the energy
Yes.
work on those. So I was curious if that's really just an Eastern Sierra, or did you see that in all your communities?
That's a great question, Mickey, and a really common problem. The burnout is real in both Ostana and Norway, and I'm sure many other places. And what I was kind of mentioning a little bit about this effort of engaging with the university, my university and the community, the time and energy it takes to get something rolling with that is just tremendous. And trying to actually have paid jobs for people to do a kind of coordinating role to get these initiatives rolling and happening, it's such a need. And yeah, that's something that I definitely would love to try to understand more, and also maybe talk with other folks here if there's what would that look like to try and have either the municipality level getting some funding to hire folks to be these kind of coordinating figures, to take the load off of your everyday person just trying to get by and just burn out, but really trying to designate paid roles to do this kind of work. So I think on a systemic level, that's really something that needs to be happening, and definitely has been expressed as a need in Hemsedal and Norway too.
So Haley, it looks like there's a question from Kevin that's come in. Are there examples of well-designed plans that have worked in mountain towns?
Yeah, I saw your point here. Thank you, Kevin. There are. One that comes to mind is that we've actually been sharing with Hemsedal as a comparative example is the town of Laux, Switzerland. So they have this green initiative that actually was quite successful in working across different systems. And I can maybe share with you some information if you just maybe send me a direct contact, or I can put my email here. I don't have the material on me right now, but if you Google Laux, Switzerland, and they're a green initiative, I think it's living systems. It was a collaboration between both the universities in the area, as well as urban planners, designers, municipalities. So it really was a holistic effort, and I think that's why it was successful. So that's one to check out.
Great. I've got a question here from Tony Taylor. I'm just gonna go ahead. Hey, Tony, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
The challenge of engaging groups who are and have not been involved in community activity. I'm thinking in Mammoth, we have a huge Latino population that doesn't seem to be involved in the things that that would be well to have them involved in. I think young adults, 20 to 40-year-olds, the Rotary Club here, we struggle to maintain our membership and have tried different ways to reach out to younger possible members without success. The Native American population, they're just our groups that are important parts of our communities and not involved in at least what I'm thinking of as traditional way.
Yeah, that's a great challenge to add here. I'm just putting it here. it was something that I've heard from other folks as well. And I think it kind of relates back to what Nikki was saying about, you know, just allowing enough resources. How do we reach people who are also working full-time, if not overtime jobs, and have so many other stressors that this is maybe the least pressing priority, which is engagement. So, you know, trying to brainstorm ways of engaging with folks that maybe is not your traditional form of outreach. So that's another point that's also in my work I'm trying to explore in the other communities, because yes, this is a huge problem in a lot of places. Those people who have time or resources to engage or who already have an interest, those are naturally the people who, you know, participate in this kind of stuff. But like you said, it's really important to get a diversity of voices. And so, yeah, we need to brainstorm different ways of engaging and also trying to alleviate some of these stressors that prevent people from having the time and resources to do it. So thank you, Tani, for that.
Carol, can you move this display up a little bit so we can see what's off the bottom of the screen?
Okay, I will try. I'm not.
Oh, maybe it's just
the things are on the bottom of the screen. Let's see if I can do it. Maybe if I shrink it a little bit. Did that help at all?
A little bit. That's okay.
Okay. And you know what we can do too is we can capture everything that's in this whiteboard. And as I mentioned, we record all these talks too, so we can also add that, you know, create a PDF of this too, that we can add to that presentation.
Absolutely.
And you know, Haley, just to follow up on Tony's question there, and I think you've really captured well from at least the workshops you've done in this area that there does seem to be some sort of segmentation socially across these different communities that live here. And I think that's a challenge we're all trying to overcome is, you know, how do we reach out to all parts of the community to engage in these efforts. And I don't know if you have examples from potentially like Italy or Norway of, you know, ways that those, if they face similar challenges in those areas, or if there are ways that work well to engage different members of the community.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing so far that I think has been quite successful is trying to find shared interests. So in Hemsedal, for example, the river, the community, many different groups within the community really value the river, but have witnessed the degradation over time and the loss of trout because of overfishing. And also from a recreational perspective, but also there's the folks who've been living there the longest are more connected to the deeper mythological kind of cultural heritage of Norway with these sagas. So there's all these different kind of layers, and actually this one sort of entity of the river speaks many different languages in that way. So that's kind of one of the goals of these synthesis maps, is to try and capture all that diversity and put it into one place. So, you know, maybe you're stuck in your own mindset that the river is just for fishing, but you don't know that it's also part of a deeper cultural legacy. So I think it's something that could be a really great thing to explore here, as well as try to identify these really shared interests. And I know also from these comments here and speaking with others, you know, this emphasis on really trying to protect this place, this region for future generations. I mean, really honing in on that, I think could be a great way to bridge some of those divides.
Yeah. So Haley, would you like to put in a plug for the workshop that you're going to be doing here next week and let folks know the time and place?
Yes, that would be great. I'll just, let's say I'm going to export this image here, just making sure it's saved. All right, that seemed to work. So we'll share that with you all. And then I'll just quickly share the workshop for next week. So it's going to be at the Page Center at SNARL. It's kind of a image is a little bit fuzzy, but it's on May 18th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And it's really going to be super low-key, casual, just about digging into some of these aspects that I spoke about today in more detail, and also learning a bit more about different resilience strategies from a kind of a theoretical perspective, but really showing concrete examples from recent research. And then, yeah, it'll be also an opportunity to explore a little bit through visual dialogue. So doing some mapping exercises. It should be fun, and you can drop by at any point. It doesn't need to be the full time. So just come by if you can.
Awesome.
And I'll also share with you here while I'm at it the sign-in sheet, also with the waiver for UC Barbara. Just if you could fill this out before, if you're like, yes, I'm definitely going to come, just so we know and can have this information. It's a Google Doc link here. I'm also just going to throw in my email just in case you need it. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Haley, and thanks for all the great information. And we look forward to seeing you here next week. And hopefully you guys that are on this call can also join and learn a little bit more about Haley's project and contribute to that. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate your contributions here too.